Howdy, we're back decompiling Castlevania Symphony of the Night. This is made up of wires. Of course, I don't have a... There we go. If you're not familiar with the Castlevania Symphony of the Night decompilation project, you can go to SotN.z.dev to see progress that we've made. On this channel, we've been decompiling the Medusa boss lately. I actually have a save point. We can see if we can find the remaining two functions there. I spent some time over the weekend, and it turned out that Sozu and DC Dreamcaster had already done a lot of the work that we did on the stream last week. Not completely all of it, and it was done a year ago. So it didn't necessarily wasn't directly importable. So I did some work there and cleaned that up, and we have that in. The Medusa cutscene still isn't in the listed in this progress page. I'm not quite sure why. But we can keep going. We don't need to know what the progress is. So there are two remaining functions left that are specific to Medusa. And then the rest of the functions there are all shared code with all the other stage overlays. The way that the bosses work, at least my impression right now, is that the main game engine has certain triggers, whether you've defeated that boss or not. And when you go through certain room transitions, when you reach one of the rooms that should be a boss, basically the boss overlay comes in and overwrites the stage overlay, but has a lot of the same tiles and everything like that. And basically the room looks like the room would be in the stage, but it's actually a separate overlay. Then you fight the boss, which sets a condition that boss is found. And then from that point forward, when you enter the room, that boss overlay won't be loaded anymore. You'll just load the normal stage overlay for that room. So let's look at what's remaining. There's actually not much because I was working on these last two functions, and there's just a few small things that I think we'll need the PSP version to help solve. And then we can start mapping the rest of the shared code. If you are new to the channel and interested in decompilation, you can go to SotN.z.dev. You'll find a link to the GitHub where all the code that we've been decompiling on the stream eventually gets submitted through PRs. I'm not the owner of the project. I am just a contributor. You could also find a link to the Discord where we're chatting about all kinds of things and tooling as well. I might show some work that I was doing over the weekend as well. So one of the things that is a great way for new contributors to get involved is to find dupes or very similar functions. So one of the theories that I've had related to dupes over the past couple months and finally got to do some work on, I'll open the dupes report. So we have a report that goes through and finds similar functions. And oh, of course, that tab is broken, so let me find that page again. Sozu wrote some tooling quite a while ago that goes through and looks at the extracted source, or the extracted assembly of functions, and then does the cross product, so like an n-squared comparison of every function with every other function, and then tries to compute a Levenstein distance between those two things. And this is awesome because it gives us every close match. That's the nice thing about a fuzzy matcher, like getting the Levenstein distance. But sometimes there's two issues that I found. What is being compared in dupes is a list of operations that a function performs. And I commented on this last week. If you look at MIPS ops, basically everything that goes to the ALU has an op of 0. So you get a bunch of these where create entities above and create entities to the right, and then likewise below and to the left. Those look like the same function, and the dupes report gives them a score of 1. And then when we're importing new overlays, the tooling looks at this same report basically and says, this function looks like the first one in this list. But in many cases, it's not actually the first one in that list. The first one in this list is kind of chosen arbitrarily. I should say arbitrarily. It's likely based on the hash value, which one comes first in the hash value. In the code, in the layout, find first entity to the left is actually the one that comes first. And so we get some mismatched symbols. And so my idea has been that instead of just looking at opcodes, we should basically look at everything, and we should be looking at immediate values and everything that's not global. But we can't look at global things because those addresses are different between different overlays. So we need to mask those out somewhere. So I wanted to find a binary grep tool. There really isn't, I couldn't find anything really good. Eventually came across bgrep, which is not included in distros, but exists on GitHub. And so ended up patching that to support external file patterns as well as external file masks. And then took a function like find first entity to the left, extracted the binary for that function, and then could use bgrep to find those. And it's really fast. So here is, let's see if I have, this one's fine. So this is going to look in all of the boss overlays and try to find create entities to the left, and boom, it finds them all. And so now we know the offsets and what that symbol should look like in all of those functions. And so that's 30 milliseconds or so to do that versus the dupes tool, which can't run in such a constrained mode at the moment, but is for the full code base runs in about 5 minutes. The comparison isn't necessarily fair because I'm looking at one function versus all of them, but I think this can help speed things up, and especially with something like make config, which is our overlay import tool. We only need the set of functions that's been extracted, and so using those as a starting point and going off to other stages until we can find the name of that symbol, I think could be much faster than what we're currently doing. So that's kind of an overview of what I was looking at this weekend that maybe we'll find a way into the code base at some point in the future. We'll see. Let's see. Good to have you back, Entropy Gravity Well. That is a bummer. It sounds like you have a rambunctious kid. I had trouble with nap time in kindergarten. I was a rule follower, still am a rule follower, but I didn't always care for nap time. I hope that's sarcasm. All right, so getting back to Medusa. So we're looking at bosses and RBO3, and RBO3 is our main C file. Yeah. I think a little bit of what's the right word? Rambunctiousness, or whatever you'd like. Spunk is good for kids. I have at least one, but maybe multiple difficult children, but I think they'll do well as well. Okay, so we have one mismatch there and one mismatch there. This function I have worked on, and it really is just missing some registers as far as I can tell. Oh, drat. Nope, it's not this one. This one has a lot of work to do. It's the other one. That one that I showed first is has some new entity extension that needs to be defined, and that's kind of interesting as well. We could look at that a little bit, maybe if we figured this one out. So we have a diff of 50, but there's this do while down here. This is kind of a hack, which kind of tricks the optimizer into thinking that this block here is in some way in a different context than other things. And so we can kind of coerce some matches that way, but it's a hack. So what I'd like to do is find this in the PSP version, and then we can see what's going on there. Yeah, hyperactivity is fun. It's really hard as a parent, and I'm sure you probably feel the same way. What is normal hyperactivity versus problematic hyperactivity? When in kindergarten, when most of us, I think, in the stream were young, we were like getting colors and patterns and tying a shoe and things like that. And now it's like sit on a desk and do academic work in kindergarten. It's crazy what kids are doing. But then by middle school, they're no further ahead. So I'm not sure what's going on there. We have a lot of education background in our family, so I do know what's going on there, but I'm not going to discuss that. Let's see. So I want to look at, let's see if I still have the PSP RBO3 extracted. I think this, yeah, it excellently got extracted to stages based on my hacky script. And I think they're all, oh, gross. Let me, sorry, I didn't have my terminal up, but it was not interesting. Anyway, I'm going to go look at the other functions that I pulled from the PSP version to get an idea of where these were. I don't recall offhand where these were. I was looking at archive.org this morning, which is back up if you haven't seen it lately. And somebody had uploaded very convincing looking Korean PC SotN release from 2001. Maybe it's not convincing. The way that they had the disk image, I thought, could this be real? And reading the comments, it sounds like it's just a PlayStation emulator with the ROMs on it. So it looks like these are in the DC90 segment. So I'm going to be looking for functions in DC90 that are about the same size as this one. I'll have to go back and see what the size of this was. So I want to look there. I'm going to look in. Just start with that. This one is 2.0. That looks like it was about 10 or 11K. Oh no, 3K. That's small. So let's see if there's any unique values that we can pull out. I totally missed out on Mr. Hey, Friedril. Good to have you. I was what am I looking at? I'm going over here. I totally was into the idea of a Mister, and I have a lot of the analog consoles, and the idea sounded good. And this was probably 2019, so pretty early on. And the Mister project had been around for a couple of years at that point. And I thought to myself, well, hardware already was kind of intermittent, like whether you could get it or not. Let's look for this value. And I thought, oh, certainly a more advanced board will come out, and then the project will move to that. And so I don't want to buy anything yet. And then COVID happened, and the D10 nanoboards just went through the roof in terms of price. And I didn't end up getting one. What else could we look for? BA is kind of an interesting value. And now there's the clone boards that are out. And so I may or may not pick one of those up. I don't know. I stupidly, well, I don't know if stupidly, it's a nice system. I went all in on Polymega when it was announced, because it was originally announced as a FPGA multi-cart system, and I have a bunch of cartridges and a bunch of discs, and I thought this will be good. And it's actually a very nice system. It's very family friendly versus a Mister. But if you didn't get in on the original batch, the prices, that is just astronomical now for those as well. I do think that the base board is around $100, but once you start adding a case and RAM and all the other expansion stuff, yeah, you're approaching 100 or $200. All right, so I'm creating a PSP scratch. I think this is the right function. We'll see in a second. I'm not concerned that it's not matching, because I'm just going to bring this over. Stop. No. Oh, okay. We're pretty close. That's good. So we can work through this and see what might be going on here. So I had pulled this tile map out. I think this was something that the Permuter suggested. It doesn't look like it was part of the original PSP version, so I'm gonna get rid of this. So the issue with this function on the PlayStation side was, or is, that there are some registers that are mismatched. And so we just need to figure out what the cause of that is. Hey, the Highlander 71. Does it produce anything runnable? What do you mean by runnable? So there are several overlays that have been completely decompiled, and so what I've shown on the stream before is we can modify code, we can recompile it. So one of the things that I ran was similar to the existing permuter, but I added some code on top of it, and it was for randomizing starting equipment. So when you start as Alucard, you'd get a precompiled set of starting equipment, but you could change that at compile time. And then just adding some additional code to show that it could be done, where your second accessory is stolen by death as well. There has been some work done on using the code to build kind of PC debug tools. So there's a PC tool for going through sounds. So we're compiling, and yeah, there's several overlays that are either done or close to done, and the ones that are done are portable and can be recompiled for different platforms. Okay, so we're just going to kind of go through and see if there's anything obvious first, and then we'll kind of get into some of the nitty-gritty. If you're not familiar with decomp.me, we have a C editor on the left. We have the assembly code that we're trying to recreate in this target column, and then in the current column is the assembly code that we're compiling to. This was code that I had already written based on the PlayStation version, and this is now the PSP version. When we see an I, that means an immediate value. In this case, it's the offset for this branch. We don't control that number directly. It's based on the code below, so we'll ignore it. Likewise, these, this is a new thing. I've not seen this before. The jump table has an interesting notation. Also something that we don't control. And immediate values, they're just symbol names. They're going to, in this case, they're going to have different values later on. Same thing down here. The symbols mapping's different, so we can't do anything about that. So line 29 is the first time that we see something different. And so here we're loading a value. And this might be similar to, I think this is a PSP difference that isn't actually going to correspond with a PlayStation change. Let me look at that other one. This one? Nope, not that one. Sorry, I'm trying to find the overlay that we were working on last week. Thursday, I said I'd see you tomorrow on Thursday. Here. So in the PSP version, it's using a particular global variable for this value versus what we see in the PlayStation version. So I'll include that macro. Just so we can get rid of the difference. And right, we'll need to define that symbol. Oh, somewhat interesting that that is being loaded in the wrong order. Let me go back to this other one and see. Oh. No. So it looks like we have a separate variable here. We already have next, so I don't need that. Oh, it's being used here. Almost. Let me see what the signature of this function is. Unsigned 16. But it's being loaded as unsigned 32. Because this function is not declared. There we go. All right, so we're left with the immediate value here. So my personal goal is, because I like reverse engineering and decompiling things, and I'm interested in Symphony of the Night. Many of the contributors have different goals. There are definitely people who are looking to be able to port the game to different platforms. There are people who like the puzzle and the challenge of it. There are people who want to mod the game and make variations of it. So different people have different goals. I'm mostly in it for the puzzle and the challenge and my interest in the game. So then down here on line 50, we have some differences here as well. So a lot of times with these, I write them like this because of the way the PlayStation version is written. But often this is what the PSP wants, and what the PSP wants, the PSP gets. And when we get a match on the PSP, we normally are able to, it normally matches on the PlayStation as well. There we go. Yeah, and I think we'll try to get into the game a little bit if I can figure this out, and we can put a breakpoint on this function and see exactly where it's being called, which I think will be fun. And you can watch me play SotN terribly again. So it looks like this is being set later, but not that much later. So let's see here. So we have this load immediate on line 55, but it's not happening until after this branch. Which appears to be part of this for loop. I don't know why we would set it there. So the AND immediate with a mask of 16 bits is telling us that at some point there's a conversion to 16-bit. Let's see if we can just define that as a 16-bit. Then we need a sign extension. What about unsigned? No. No. Maybe it's not actually loading this into a variable and just assigning it. How about that? Slightly better. We have a load immediate of 3. So I think this was caused by the compiler. So the optimizing compiler in GCC. For people new to the stream, the PlayStation version of the game was compiled with a version of GCC with level 2 optimization, which is the standard optimization for most compilers. But the PSP version of the game was compiled, same code mostly, was compiled with MetroWorks with no optimization. And the fact that it has no optimization allows us to see a more linear and more verbose version of the assembly language, which provides more hints then for what the optimized version is. And the creative part of this whole endeavor is that lots of different code will compile to the same assembly language, which is why this is not considered copyright infringement or anything like that. What we're doing is creative and takes work, and the decompiler can't just automatically figure these things out. So with multiple versions of the game, we get to see different sets of assembly, and basically we're trying to come up with code that fits both of those sets of assembly. And most of the time we can. And sometimes we have to do things like this, where there are actual differences between the two games. So line 81, same thing here. So on the GCC side, the way that this code was generated was set a value of 3 and then decrement through the for loop. But this was written as an increment for loop. Yeah, so this is where some problem was being had on the other side as well. And it's possible that the changes that I made above are going to kick GCC into in the pants related to this particular change. So this is how I originally had this line written. So setting y equal to adding 2 values together. That's a relatively straightforward line of code. But I couldn't get this to match in this form on the GCC side. And often when you have completely unrelated code, either control structures or variables or other things like that, at different points in your function, the optimizer is kind of balancing what registers am I using, what like how much context am I going to use to compare to other sections in the program. You get really funny instructions in places that are completely unrelated to where the change actually needs to be made. And that's what's nice about the PSP version. All right, my first playthrough was on the Vita as well. What's interesting about I not being in the loop is that I could be in the loop, depending on how you were calculating this FG index. And I didn't know before I started whether this was going to be a multiply by I, 32 multiplied by I plus one of these two values or not, but it looks like yeah, it's just incrementing this along the way. All right, so I think this might be the last one, 103. Oh no, we have two of them. And this might be the same or very similar code. So we have some register issues here. So this this position y is being set as a 32-bit value. It's more often than not, the lower half of this is used as a 16-bit value. This possibly could be broken up here to do I high. Sorry, that'll be low on the top. But no. I was looking at the way the instructions were written. So it has to break this addition up, but it is ultimately storing the word. MIPS, the way MIPS processors work in the 32-bit case, they have every instruction is 32 bits in length. And so you can't load a 32-bit value or anything over a 16-bit value in a single instruction, and so you need two of them. And so we don't see this hex 12,000 in the assembly. We see a hex 2,000 because that's the 16-bit portion, and then we see a 1, which is the upper part of the 16 bits of that 32-bit value, and they have to load them in two instructions. And so often in immediate values, when you're loading addresses, you see the same thing. And Splat is actually really good at identifying those cases where two loads are happening to the same register. And they don't even have to be right next to each other. They could be a couple instructions apart. And it will figure out that those are the same. We're just loading that one value in to the register. And it's within the address space that we'd normally look at. So it's probably an address, and it'll treat it as a symbol then. Okay, so back to this 103. So let's... Oh, I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. So yeah, what is the difference between greater or equal to 256 versus, sorry, 128? No, 128. What's going on here? Oh, I have the wrong value here. That's why. So, sorry. What is the difference between greater or equal to 128 or greater than 127? To humans, nothing, but to the compiler, everything. Down here, I think it's going to be the same thing as before, where this is being pulled out into a separate variable, this calculation. And then we should be able to get rid of this while. And there we go. I think that's it. I think that matches. There's obviously differences for the immediate values, but everything else works. And so cross your fingers. Let's try it on the PlayStation version. And the PlayStation version gives us the same, only 50 instructions, 99.74. There's a few things that were hard to catch in decomp.me that the decompiler didn't generate. There's this case 11, as well as these 3 cases here that just break. Those seem necessary for the jump table that gets generated. Uh, hold the party. We'll see if it works. I've had this down to the same diff before. Yeah. So let's see what's... This didn't work. Why? Why didn't it work? What is happening here, my guess, is that all the instructions are correct. The jump table is just one entry too big. So let's get rid of this case 11, which... Let's see if that works. No. That doesn't work either. So it's possible that this is a issue with the splat config, and maybe I'll look at that before moving on. So what's happening here is our jump table is supposed to be starting here at 10F08. No, C. But it's starting late. It's not starting until here. Yeah. I did... So let's open Splat and see what that config and see what might be going on here. So I'm looking at the RBO3. So we're looking at the RO data here, and just as a refresher, we're looking for what's happening at this address here, or this offset in the file, 10F00. And 10F00 is already in the RBO3 RO data. When I was dealing with this over the weekend, my thought was that there still is another function up here that hasn't been decompiled yet, and the way that its RO data is being pulled in is being padded somehow. And so let's look at that function and see what the RO data looks like. So it's possible that just the way that this was extracted, or the way that the linker script is working to pull this back in, the offsets are incorrect. I don't really want to do a split to fix this, but it might be necessary, and it could be that we just decompile this other function first, get that one matching, and then when we bring the other one in, that the offsets will work out. So let's look at that one and see what the RO data there looks like. That doesn't make me happy, but things don't always work out the way you want. That's okay. Oh, this actually doesn't have any RO data. So Biz Murphy is suggesting a split at 2D64. And where is that compared to where we are? Oh, that's the function we're working on. So we can try adding a split here. I think if we had that other function decompiled, it wouldn't make a difference. But we could try it. Yeah, we could look at that as well. So what is this? This is actually a different jump table. Because I have the other functions compiled and just clean, though, I don't have this data anymore. So what's directly above this? Let's split it. I don't want to, but I like to see the green. So we're gonna have a new drat. We have a new split at FOC. So when, for anybody who hasn't been following along in the past couple weeks, when you write a function that has a big switch statement, the compiler is going to take that switch and build a table. And depending on the number of cases that you have in the table, in this case there was 11, there'll be 11 entries in the table, and those are all addresses that you jump to, and it will check to see if the value in your switch is bigger than that table, and if so, it'll take you to the default case. Otherwise, it'll have entries in it for effectively every other value that exists. And that table gets put into a section called RO data. What's happening now is where I expect that table to be at a particular offset is not at that place. But we can fix it. It's not the worst thing ever. When the rest of this file is written in C, this split won't be necessary. So I'm going to take that. We can have Splat generate this file for us, but I'm just going to create it. I think that's correct. And we'll just pull all everything below. So with the way that the toolchain for overlays works, basically functions are written to the overlay in order. And hopefully we have all of our declarations, but we'll try that. And I might have to clean. But let's see what our difference was. Yeah, that's much worse than I wanted. Let's clean. Oh, this is a trick that I learned a while ago. If I force it to recompile everything, often that works. In this case, it didn't. Still different. And I'm going to do one more thing before I clean and lose this function. I just want to make sure I have my offset correct. That was the wrong one. Oh, did I lose this now? I might have lost it already. That's the way. So looking at where did I get the 10 FOC value from? I got it from here. When I was looking at the diff earlier, that was the position in that hex dump output. But that is the correct one for this table. And 12D64 is what our offset for this function is. I just want to make sure that those are the same before getting too far into this. And one of the things that I don't know if you feel the same way, Biz Murphy, is I'll come up with ideas for how things should be split, or what offsets are symbols, what their addresses should be, and I'll go through and I'll come up with a relatively comprehensive change, and then I'll run and my checksum fails, and I check the diff, and it's way worse than when I started. Anytime that there's additional padding or offsets, yeah. I'm going to put that case 11 back. Yeah, we're still way off. Okay. So at this point, what I will... Oh, I was in the wrong file. That's why. Brack. Any Space Ghost fans? Okay, so why did that work? In decomp.me, if we look at the decompilation, like I said, the decompilation ends up missing several cases. So we don't get the 5, 6, 7 cases, and we don't get case 11 either. And the way that I found those, usually I don't even look at it, but we have these RO data labels throughout, and when the decomp.me doesn't even give you a strong indication of a diff, it does color them, but I noticed that this one was off down here, and I think this whole label was just missing altogether. Oh no, that gets generated there as part of the break. And then when I looked at the jump table, it did have 11 entries, or 12 entries, as expected. But because that offset was broken, I had to get rid of one of the entries for the code to align, or that RO section of the code to align. But the issue was that padding. And so by breaking this out into a separate file, we're able to kind of control where that RO data goes specifically, as opposed to an object file being created for this, and then the linker script just taking everything from that RO data and putting it in place. And I usually see this when there is RO data that's being pulled in from some assembly source, or just a mix of assembly and C. And like I said, once this one gets decompiled, I think this will work out, and those can be put back. All right, thank you, Nate the Great. Yeah, now we can party. Where's my party? Too many clicks for for confetti. All right, so let's see where this function is. See if we can figure out if we can even. Can we even SotN, bro? Can we trigger this function by playing the game? So I'm going to this all loaded. Figure out where my debugger is. I'm not sure if we can. I have not looked and tried to do this yet. So I'll just fight Medusa poorly, and then we can see what happens there. So I'm using DuckStation. In general, I think for a workflow perspective, I'd like to use PCSX Reloaded more. There's issues with everything. I just was reading over the weekend about the relicensing mess for DuckStation. I'm glad we didn't have anything like that on this project. But the DuckStation maintainer decided that they were going to go through and relicense everything, I think under a Creative Commons license that doesn't allow redistribution of changes. But they didn't go through and get permission of previous contributors. So the license for DuckStation right now is dubious. This is a version well before any of that happened. I think the previous versions were GPL something. I don't know. All right, so we have a debugger. I have window mode on in OBS, so it's not easy for me to show you what I'm doing, but there is a when you pause the game and then hit this plus button, you get an add breakpoint, and you can add an address there. And so I'm adding the address, which is the name of this function, which happens to be the address that it gets loaded at in memory. And there is a type. Actually, let me see it. It's probably better if I just show this window. Nope, I don't want to do that either. It's nice that it decides that it's going to show you whatever window it selects. Thankfully, I don't have anything of dubious nature. DuckStation doesn't name its windows, so I have no idea. I can't select it. Oh, there we go. All right. So this is the add breakpoint window. So I'm putting the address saying execute, and that will add an address down there. And the window went away, so DuckStation thinks it should capture whatever window it decides to next, which is my calculator. So now when we play, if we hit this particular breakpoint, we should see... we should stop at this function. What I'm going to do, though, is I'm also going to add all of the other functions that are specific to Medusa, and see if we hit any of those as well. I think we'll hit one of them. I don't know which one yet. This is riveting, I'm sure. Just wait till I start playing. We have a handful of these. I'll try to do this fast. I would like to spend some time looking at how GDB server is implemented in either this or PCSX Reloaded. I think it would be very fun to be able to go through with a real debugger and step through code line by line. I think up until doing decomps, that wasn't really a very important feature to have, but now that we have so many decomps, it seems like it would be useful. All right, so I have my breakpoint set. I'm going to continue. I don't have my controller on. Mr. MIDI, I'm adding so many breakpoints. These 8 functions are the Medusa exclusive functions. So everything else in the Medusa overlay is shared stage code, and these are functions that are specific to this boss. All right, so that is working. Or have we broken? Yes, we did. So we've hit our first one at B38. And let's look at that. There's some logic here related to the time attack controller. So this probably is just kind of like the initialization of this particular space. If we get bogged down in hitting this over and over, I will skip it. And almost immediately we hit 2EC. I don't ever have luck in disabling these and having that disable actually work. But we'll kind of get rid of these as we hit them. 350. Mostly I want to see if that D64, if we hit that. So maybe I'll disable all these until then. That's pretty smart. And we hit it almost immediately. So we're not in the room yet, and I'm going to unpause, or disable that one as well, and see if once we're in the room we get that. No, yeah, so all of these, so the game loop, effectively every frame we'll go through and look at active entities and call the functions related to those entities. I was hoping that some of these were more state dependent on where you were in the fight, or whether or not Medusa had loaded. I guess she's right there, so she has loaded. Oh, that's kind of a bummer. I mean, we're hitting that breakpoint. We're in that function, but it's not like, for example, when I was looking at the Dracula fight, there are very discrete moments where some of the functions in that fight get called. For example, when a fireball is happening, or when the background gets pulled back, and you can, based on what's happening in the game, you can tell what that function is used for then. In this case, though, we're getting hit right away. I'm going to start the fight, and then we'll pause it, and then see if that's still the case. I'm going to pause here, and we'll turn that one back on. And that's still getting hit. Okay, so let's go back and look at that. And just go through. Oops, that's when I was playing Snatcher. Hey, Snatcher fans, more Konami games. All right, so we can kind of look through as well, and we have the offsets for various cases in here as well that we can figure out, like, what state are we in for this particular entity. Just kind of going through, we're creating entity 1DU. There's various changes to tile maps. I'm trying to see if there's anything obvious here. Is there a foreground layer in this? Let's look at that. Stone. Yeah, we're still getting hit. Unfortunately, this ended up being less interesting than I had hoped. But one thing I will show you, though, is we'll get our item. I am going to... I'll leave the room, and we'll put that breakpoint back on. It's possible that we hit code... Oh, sorry. I'll get it off and then leave the room and then come back. I'll leave the room, and so that took a while to load. That's because we're loading the inverse chapel overlay, or anti-chapel overlay again. Now if I put this breakpoint back on, there isn't any code anymore that's calling into that because we're not using that Medusa overlay anymore. It could be by coincidence that we hit that breakpoint again, but it would be a completely different function, and we'd be loading something else, doing something else completely. Yeah, so of these 8 functions, I think kind of going through and looking at some of the unnamed variables and trying to decipher what they're for is probably the better way of going through and figuring those out. But it does look like we have another match, which is good, and so we're down to 1 function remaining for Medusa, and we can start working on that now. We only have about 15 minutes, but I think it's worth starting. Yeah, we could look at that 1D entity. Let's do that. I don't think okay, so let's look at none of the header data has been decompiled yet, so we have to look at the we have to look at just the assembly extract. But we can come through here, and so 1D is going to be 1629. So that's 3 AD. Nope, multiply by 4. .404. So that is our .1D function. Oh, I was thinking of the wrong thing. I don't know where the entity data is offhand. I can try to work on that though and come back to it tomorrow. So let's look at that last function then. This one had some funny things in it. So this is the last function then in that Medusa boss overlay that's unique. Okay, yeah, I can look at libretro. Yeah. I'll try to take a look at it. So Biz Murphy's saying the entity that's being spawned basically is the same thing as itself. It is. Let's look at it one more time. What it's doing is, and my guess is that it's either like the floor tiles or something similar to that. So over where is it? I thought there was a, yes, here it is. So it's going to kind of recurse until it's told to stop by setting the second bit. And along the way, it's kind of adjusting the X and Y values. And so this is kind of an interesting way. Actually, maybe it's only recursing twice, because it sets this right away on the next value. The way that params works in this case is kind of interesting, and I don't know if a lot of work, none that I've seen, or not a lot of work that I've seen anyway, has gone into mapping the fields of params of various entities. And the way that we're doing it now basically is just by bit masking, checking bits, and other things like that. And I think there's more that probably needs to be built out around macros, around parameters, a lot in a very similar way to how the extension fields of an entity are being used. Because this entity is using these bits in params in a very specific way. And so if we had either a bit field struct or something else in place of this, we could address these by name if we knew what they were. And that would probably make things easier to figure out as we want to, just like the ext field. Anyway, let's go back to that other function. So this one's pretty early on. What's interesting about this one is that there is a new ext structure that's necessary to get this one to compile. And it's possible that this is actually Medusa. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. It might be like the laser. That could be. But there is offsets in the ext field here that don't map with the other things related in this function. So I'm gonna kind of start from the bottom. This one's early on. Normally on the stream I would go through and upload the assembly for this and go through setting this up. However, I started this over the weekend thinking It wasn't very large, and so I kind of thought maybe I'll just knock this one out and then we'll be done with Medusa and can move on to something else. But it ended up not being as straightforward as I had hoped. Okay, so kind of going through. What we're often trying to do with these is really just get rid of variables that are unnecessary, and get all this as close to matching as we can, but usually there's cleanup, such as these, which can be rewritten RGB. And as this gets cleaned up, it'll the size of this will drop quite a bit. Temp fee 0 is this value here. It's likely that this variable is just going to be I times 4. And then temp A0 can go away. And so can this var T0. Oh, it is doing this add. Okay, so I can't do that. Here as well. Oh, and that's because these are set to these constants above, and we're mutating those constants as we go through. So let me get back to this. No, those aren't quite right either. Let me go back to what the decompiler produced. Sometimes you can, yes. So the decompiler comes through and tries to figure out what, so we have a union called ext, which is used differently by different entities. And I actually hadn't seen this before, but the decompiler comes in and says, okay, the union can be any one of these structs. What struct do you want it to be? Because I don't have offsets that match any of these yet. So I think I'm just going to grab this again. Looks like I got a little too presumptuous with my changes. Var S4 was being used for I. And var S2 is our primitive. Drat. I'm kind of in no man's land where I I had already solved some of these unknown offsets. Those are a little strange because M2C should have known what those were, but didn't for reasons that I'm not sure. So for these, we have to look at, I'm going to do this off screen, but what are these offsets in a primitive? So offset 10 is R1. These are all the R's. This is R2, R3, and this one is R0. And then normally I would put those on one line, but it's a little strange that they are not. We're back to compiling. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. So Bismurphy's saying that because these are actually they're out of order now. These are just 8-bit values. So doing a low on them doesn't make sense. And they're being loaded as bytes. They are out of order though. So let's find the first one that is in the correct spot, which is this T page. I am going to see if I can kind of coerce these. Draw mode and priority usually are pulled out of order. Oh, I see what you're saying. Do I? No, I don't. Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay. So what is going on is it's almost as if RGB are being set all at once as 32-bit values instead of, and let's see if we can emulate that. I'm not sure if the optimizer is doing this or if this was written out. So effectively this is a 32-bit, this could be written as a 32-bit copy. And from what I can tell, that's what is happening here, is that the compiler's coming through and just, oh, P1. That's weird though, that's weird. The compiler's just coming through and overwriting this 1 byte at a time, or sorry, 1 word at a time. Okay. Shoot. Keyboarding. You should learn your keyboards, kids. And so we're probably going to do that for R2 and R3 as well. Thank you. That helps a lot. Yeah, that seems like it makes more sense. What's odd though, so the what I noticed about primitive, rstruct primitive, it's the same as a GT4 in the SDK, but GT4 doesn't have they pack the color into a 32-bit word and just use the first 24 bits of that word. And so the Konami developers, when they came in, they said, hey, I have free bytes in this struct that aren't being used by the SDK. We're going to start sticking other things in those positions. And so you might be right that... So GT4 doesn't. We can look at GT4. Sorry, I had this open. I was looking at it. So the primitive struct is the same layout as Poly GT4 in the SDK. And let's see if I can get the right capitalization. I don't know if I did. Great. So if you look at the PlayStation 1 SDK, you can find this defined in the documentation. It, interestingly, is not, as far as I can tell, in the documentation for the PSP. I'm not sure exactly how that worked, because you obviously could recompile. So they do call it code. I know that for sure. Okay, so here's like pad 2, pad 3. There are fields in here that are not used by the SDK, and they are used in SotN. So for this pad becomes draw mode, which we see quite a bit. The pad up here becomes priority. Where is the first one? We we only have pad 2 and 3. Nobody talks about pad 1. Yeah, I think this is interesting. It also is. It's clever how concerned developers were with optimizing as much as possible. So obviously they wanted to use this Poly GT4, and if I remember correctly, these primitives are passed directly to the SDK functions that that take a Poly GT4. I spent too long looking at this one day when I thought when I realized that these overlap with one another, thinking, do we need primitive, or can we just use Poly GT4 everywhere? And let me see if I can load that up. One last thing. The more you know. The original libref PDF for the SDK is unfortunately unsearchable, at least in Mac preview. But they did provide an index, which is nice. And where's my extended graphics library? Oh. So the documentation, which page is this on? 255. This is a completely legitimately acquired reference to the PlayStation SDK. Legitimately from archive.org. Okay, so the what we call type or primitive type is a 1-byte code, and the SDK says that it's reserved, and then like P1 also, like, so several of these are reserved, but the to me as a developer, that would say these are reserved for use by the SDK and I can't touch them. However, the SotN developers did not feel that way, and they stored all kinds of stuff there. And it's possible that these were never used, or that developers started using these right away, and so that they could never be used with later versions of the SDK. But yeah, they are reused quite a bit in the game. I think my time is probably up for today, so I am gonna sign off. We were decompiling Castlevania Symphony of the Night. I am a contributor to the Castlevania Symphony of the Night decompilation project, and you can learn more about that project at sotn.z.dev. There's a link to the GitHub repo that has all the code that we've decompiled so far. If this page loaded properly, you'd see progress. And there it is. You can see progress on the overlays that we've started or completed in some cases. We were working on the Medusa overlay, which only has 8 unique functions in it compared to other stage overlays. And we're working on the last function there, and I'll probably work on it tonight. And if it's not finished, I'll keep working on it tomorrow, and we can see what needs to be done there. The remaining work in this Medusa overlay is related to importing our shared code into the stage. The remaining code is all duplicates from other stages, or should be. So most of that work is just bookkeeping and making sure that we get offsets right. So over the next day or two, maybe not so much decompiling and just doing some of that bookkeeping, because it's just as necessary as the decompilation part. There's a link also on this page to the Discord server where we're talking about all kinds of stuff related to SotN decomp. And I'm here Monday through Thursday, an hour and a half previous to now, doing these streams. I upload them to YouTube if you're interested and are here for the first time. Give a follow, subscribe on YouTube, and I will see you all tomorrow. Thanks for joining. It's always fun